Okay, today we are going to practice some of those independent and dependent statements. Remember, we have to do everything from a table, word problem, equation, and graph. So we have to get good at all four of those. So that's what we're going to practice today. Okay? I'm going to work through some with you, and then you're going to do some on your own. So let's look at number 1. It says Jessie received a statement from her bank listing the balance in her money market account for the past 4 years. What is the independent quantity in this table? Okay, if you will turn in your quantities, values, units, independent and dependent variables packet to page number 4, it will really help you with all of these. Okay, you need to get in the habit of going back and forth and checking those problems against your packet to make sure that you're getting the independent and dependent right. Eventually you won't need to do that, but right now it's a good practice. That packet should be in your notebook, so it shouldn't be a problem to go back and look at it. Okay? So we are looking at a table. So if you go to the part on page 4 that says from tables, it's going to be pretty easy for you. We talked about how the left side of a table is always your X, and the right side of your table is always a Y. Okay? Make sure you're writing this down when I write it down. So if my X is time and my Y is balance, and it's asking for the independent quantity in this table. Okay, we know the word quantity means what's being measured. Okay, and we know that independent is always going to be on the left. This is our independent. Well, we have 3 things written here that we could choose from. This is the variable. Years is how it's being measured, so that's the units. Time is what is being measured, so that's the quantity. So the correct answer here is time. Okay? Let's look at number 2. It says Giorgio is in charge of making 120 corsages for homecoming. He decides to ask some of his classmates for help. The number of corsages each person can make can be represented by the function y equals 120 divided by x plus 1, where x is the number of classmates that help him make corsages. Okay? Just in case you don't know, corsages are flower things like you wear to prom. Okay. So what is the dependent quantity of this function? Dependent. Okay? If you look at this equation right here, we have an x and we have a y. Okay? We know that dependent is always y. Okay? How do we know that? Well, it's always y. We also know that in an equation, the dependent variable is always what's by itself. Okay? So, but we're not looking for the dependent variable. We're looking for the dependent quantity. We have to figure out what y stands for. Okay? So if you just wrote down y, I would mark this answer wrong. That's not a quantity, that's a variable. I need to know what the y stands for. Okay? So we've got to read what it is. It says x is the number of classmates. Well, that doesn't really help us. Okay? Here's a hint. The dependent, or your y, is always going to be the total. You just have to figure out total what. Okay? Well, it says the number of corsages each person can make. That's your dependent. That's your total. Okay? So the dependent quantity is the number of corsages each person can make. Okay? So, let's look at number 3. Okay, the TM tennis team played a total of 162 matches last season. The number of matches the team lost, L, and the number of matches the team won, W, are represented by the formula below. What quantity does the dependent variable represent? Okay, what's important here is these two words. Dependent tells us which one, and variable tells us what we're looking for. Okay, variable is a letter, so your answer is going to be a letter. Okay, your two options looking at this equation are L and W. We know that the dependent is the one that's always alone. So this one is always alone. So our correct answer is L. And you know what? I just messed up there. We're going to erase this. This is a little l, so your answer needs to be a little l. Okay? That's something that we will go talk about over and over again with variables. If it starts as capitalized, it stays as capitalized. If it's lowercase, then it stays lowercase. Okay, you can't change it, otherwise you change what we're talking about. So that needs to be a lowercase l, and that's the only one that we have to answer. Okay? Number 4 is the last one that I'm going to do with you, and then you're going to start doing them on your own. Okay? Number 4 says Pat hikes at an average of 4 miles per hour. The number of miles she hikes, m, is viewed as a function of the number of hours, h, she hikes. What is the independent variable? Okay? Sometimes these things get a little wordy. So we need to kind of take some of those words out. Number 1, we're looking for a variable. Okay? Our two variables are m and h. And see this right here? As a function of. We're going to rewrite it with just variables and as a function of. M comes first, so that's what I'm going to write. Is a function of h, because it's my second variable. Wrote them in order. I just took the number of miles she hikes and all the other words out and just simplified it as much as we could get. Because all we care about is the variables. We don't care about what they stand for, because it's asking us for a variable. Okay? So when we see the words is a function of, I want you to get in the habit of marking that out and writing depends on. Okay? M depends on H. If M is doing the depending, it is the dependent. If it's being depended on, then H is the independent. So the correct answer is going to be H. We don't care what it stands for. All they're asking us for is the variable. So as you start at number 5 and start going through, remember two things. That you need to look at, are they asking for the quantity or the variable? If it's the quantity, your answer is going to be a word. If it's the variable, it's going to be a letter. Okay? The second thing that you need to remember, especially as I'm sitting here looking at 5, 6, and 7, the total cost is always your dependent. Okay? You might want to write that down somewhere. If it was me, I would make sure to write it on that page where we have all the tables and the equations. Dependent is always your total cost. Okay? I'm also going to write it here. Total cost equals dependent. Okay? So, you know what? I'm feeling extra generous today. Let's look at number 5. That'll be the last one we do together. Okay? Number 5. It says a taxi driver charges an initial fee of $5 plus 50 cents per mile. What is the independent quantity in this situation? Okay? When you do problems like this, and they're usually going to say per something, okay? You have an initial fee, and then you have more money per something. Okay? Every single time, this is what you need to remember. Your total cost is your dependent. Okay? Your independent is whatever is going to be after the per. Okay? Let's go ahead and write that down. Independent, word, after, per. Okay? Because that's what changes. That's what changes my total cost. If I go 1 mile, my cost is going to be a lot less than if I go 30 miles. Okay? So my cost depends on how far I go, or how many miles. Okay? So, looking at here, it's the independent is the word after per. Here's per. There's the word after. What is the independent quantity? Number of miles. Okay? You could also put how far they drove. Okay? But as long as that we understand that it is the per mile. The dependent in this situation, it's not asking for it, but if it was, the dependent would be the total cost. It's what you care about. When you're getting into that taxi, you care about how much money is going to come out of your pocket. Okay? It's the same for bills. It's the same for when there's an electrician or plumber problem. It's always how much is it going to cost you. That's the dependent. Okay? So you try the rest of them, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You do not have to do number 12. Okay? So you may stop after 11. In fact, if you just want to cross this out, that's fine. Okay, so stop after 11.